Hey everybody, welcome back to the Preacher Boys podcast. Today's episode is one that I have wanted to happen pretty much since the show started. There weren't many things that were on my personal bucket list when I started Preacher Boys. It was really, let's raise awareness, let's cover these topics, like very general things that have also happened throughout the course of the show. But there were a couple people that were on my list that I wanted to talk to really badly. People that I wanted to talk to because I love their work. And today's guest is definitely one of those. He was near the top of the list, and that is, of course, Chris Hansen. If you're like me, you've binge watched every episode of To Catch a Predator. You're super familiar with Chris Hansen's work, so I won't bore you with an introduction here. But he's an absolutely amazing person in person. We had a great conversation with him, and I was so lucky to co-host this episode with my friend Travis Chappell for his show Travis Makes Friends, and he was kind enough to let me be a part of this, let me take part in this filming, and knew how much I wanted to connect with this guest, so I want to give a big shout out to him. This episode was so much fun, and I know you're going to appreciate every second. So let's get into today's show.
Chris, have a seat.
Thank you, Travis. You took my line. But
Yeah.
I'll let you do it.
On purpose, yeah.
Thank you.
So on this episode, for those of you watching and listening, you may be familiar with my producer, Eric. I asked Eric to sit in on this episode because Eric's podcast, Preacher Boys, talks a lot about abuse within the religious subsect that we both grew up in the independent fundamental Baptist world. And so Eric has been looking forward to this conversation as well. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I know we're limited on time. You got a new show coming out, lots of stuff happening. So before we jump into some backstory and context, let's throw a quick plug in at the very beginning so people know what you got going on and why we're even here at South Point to begin.
Well, in Vegas, here at the South Point Casino, we're doing a live, interactive, multimedia show on February 3rd, 4th, and 5th called, Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. So it's a tell-all taking people behind the scenes of 19 years of investigation. So people are going to see things they haven't seen before, hear things they haven't seen before, and have a chance to interact with me, and we'll have some items on set actually from the investigations that people get a chance to interact with. But I'm excited about it because I think it's an extension of what we've been doing at TruBlu, our new streaming network, with crime reporting and continuing to do the Predator investigations and to bring people inside of it. And at the end of the day, obviously there's entertainment value here. Mm-hmm. There's a dark, humorous level to it, undoubtedly. Mm-hmm. But it all brings attention to a very important topic. And it's a crime where there is no demand reduction, right? Mm. It's not like the drug problem. So your best defense is education and awareness and how you teach kids to be safe, just like some of the guys you profile in your investigations and your shows, to protect themselves. And that's really what it's about. If you can get inside the mind of a predator, understand a little bit how that works, hear the voice of a victim, you can prevent other people from becoming victims.
So February 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
And 5th, right here at the South Point.
Here at South Point Hotel in Vegas. So I know everybody out there is always looking for an excuse to come to Vegas, so now you have one. February 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We're going to try to come through with me and my wife, him and his wife, and everything.
Oh, awesome.
Support.
Great to have you. Thank you very much.
Be a great time. So, rewind the clock, Chris. Sure. I want to go back in time. Whenever I talk with anybody, and I say this a lot so people that are listening might think this is repetitive. Whenever I talk with somebody who has who has taken something and turned it into just a very eclectic and interesting career, I never seem to find that person wrote this on like the what I want to be when I grow up form when you were 9.
It's not a career day thing where it's
there wasn't a booth.
In this business, if you wait till career day, it's too late, But I did always want to be a television reporter.
Okay.
From a very early age. We grew up in suburban Detroit, a mile and a half from where Jimmy Hoffa was last seen and presumably kidnapped. I became fascinated at 15 years old. Used to ride my bike up to the crime scene, and we had neighbors who were involved in the investigation. The network news guys were there, the local news guys, the FBI, the police. And so I guess I got bit by the bug a little bit back then. So when I went to Michigan State at college, I just walked over from the dorm and signed up for the campus radio news network. Okay. And suddenly one day I was a reporter.
What did your parents do?
My dad was in the auto industry, in sales.
That makes sense in Detroit.
Yeah, in Detroit, like virtually everybody else in the neighborhood. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom for many years until she decided to go show homes at a development near our neighborhood. A luxury home development was built on, when I was growing up, what was 40 acres of woods. And she turned that into being head of sales for a major luxury home builder, and had quite a successful career herself late in life. I mean, I don't think she started this till she was in her 50s, and it was a great source of pride for me to see how she was able to do this in professionalism that she had. And my wife and I will be at social settings. We have an apartment in New York City and a home in Michigan, still suburban Detroit, and people will come up to us and say, "Your mother sold us a home, 20 years ago."
That's hilarious.
And she treated us like she would treat you or your two sisters. And that was one of the secrets to her success, was she cared whether you're the wealthiest person or you're kind of ham and egging it to try and get in this luxury home.
Right.
She would tell you, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And she cared about every detail in those homes and was the liaison between, the owner of the home building company, it was a family-owned company, and the buyer, and would make sure all the finishing touches were done to their satisfaction. And she was great. She made a great living.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Was there any pressure or encouragement to do a certain something with your life at all? Or was it just like, go to school, get a good job, do what you want to do?
There was no, intense pressure. Nobody went to an Ivy League school there was an expectation of going to college in those days. My mom was very supportive, and when my dad would be traveling for his job, she would make sure that I was out the door at 8 o'clock to go caddy or work at Mr. Pacey's bakery or whatever I was doing.
So they very much encouraged us.
Oh yeah, I mean, I worked from the age of 13.
There you go.
Whether it was hauling golf bags at the local country club or doing whatever I was doing. I always joke that I only had 3 prior jobs to being a journalist. It was caddying, Mr. Pastry's Bakery as a baker's apprentice, hauling drywall, and then journalism. That's it. That's all.
That's the traditional path if you want to be a journalist.
Exactly.
So if you're listening, that's the step.
Although hauling drywall with guys from the inner city did give me a great education, one that you could not get just at Michigan State University. I mean, in terms of life lesson and dealing with people from all walks of life, and
empathy, respect.
Well, hard work.
Yeah.
Imagine being 17 years old, graduating from Brother Rice High School, showing up to work hauling drywall, which you're not really sure what that entails, but you know that the company's owned by a pal of your dad's, and you're going to make $7.50 an hour, which in 1977 was a boatload of money and paid for a lot of tuition. And you jump in the truck with Lee Arthur Ramsey, and your job is to take one part of this 2-sheet mound drywall package weighing hundreds of pounds and get it to the next direction without breaking your partner's back, who's an adult who's supporting his family by doing this, not just doing it for the summer. Jump in the truck, there's a pack of cigarettes on the dashboard, and he looks at me and says, "You smoke? You want a cigarette?" I go, "No, I don't smoke." He goes, "Good, you need all the briff you got. Let's go." And he was my partner for the next 3 years.
That's fantastic.
He's a great guy, great lessons.
I mean, journalism is broad. There's a lot of different stories you can cover. Like, what made you push in the direction of Predators? I know it was supposed to be originally a one-off story, and then it took off. Like, what drove you to the story initially?
Well, I was always interested in investigative crime-type stories, enterprise stories, things where we employed hidden cameras. And so when I learned about this online watchdog group, Perverted Justice, I started to think if we could use their ability to be decoys online and our ability at the network to wire a house with hidden cameras and microphones, it could be pretty compelling. So at the time, Perverted Justice would put decoys in the chat rooms, and if an adult approached one of the decoys posing as a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, obvious profile, and there was a sexual liaison plan, they would post this person's picture and identity on the website. Well, we took it a step further. We created a scenario where we would come face to face with this potential child predator and confront them. So we did so in Bethpage, Long Island, and I was driving out there and I wondered, did we just blow tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money and nobody was going to show up, which is always, if it was easy, everybody could do it, So we didn't partner or collaborate with law enforcement for that or the second investigation. And, I'm driving out there and my producer calls and says, "Where the hell are you? We've got 2 guys scheduled in 45 minutes. And, 2.5 days later, 17 guys had surfaced in that investigation, including a New York City firefighter. So the show kind of sat at the network for a minute.
Yeah.
And people were in the executive ranks trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we do it? This is obviously phenomenally compelling material.
Right.
I mean, stuff that has never been seen on television before. How do we do it? And I remember being in a meeting, and we shot this in February 2004. Now we're in late summer, early fall, and I'm sort of pushing to get this on TV.
Yeah.
And an executive looks at me and says, I just don't know how to promote it. And I, much to the shock of everybody in the room, I said, you know how to promote this? Here's how you promote it. There's a man on your back porch with his penis in his hand, and he wants to stick it in your daughter. Tonight we're going to tell you how to prevent that from happening.
I don't remember that TV spot.
No, it wasn't a spot, but I was so frustrated at not getting it on the air. That's basically,
it's like, let me be as blunt as possible.
And I did it for shock value.
Marketing piece.
Yeah, and so everybody's looking at me like Hansen's finally lost his mind. and there was a
Did he
collective.
just say that?
There was a collective. I mean, everybody was on. I'm being sarcastic here and facetious to make a point, but everybody sort of understood. Okay, it's time.
Sure,
we're going to do the best we can with this material. It's pushes the boundaries of what you can put on primetime television.
It's a proceed with caution.
And so there was a legitimate concern. People weren't trying to hush it up or cover it up or anything. Didn't need to insinuate that. Everybody wanted this to go on TV, and so we did it, and it had quite a response. And so we did it again, and the third time we collaborated with law enforcement, and some of the cases were prosecuted in the first two investigations, but at the end of the day, these guys would walk out the door. And so it wasn't really the most socially responsible way to proceed. Mm-hmm. And from a television production standpoint, it was rather unfulfilling to see these guys walk away, even though in some of the cases they were later prosecuted. So we did from then on, and up until, including the new investigations we're doing now as we speak, we collaborate with law enforcement. And it's the only responsible way to do it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking a big responsibility on your shoulders.
Well, right. And, when we used perverted justice decoys, that was, I think, a sound way to proceed. They're no longer in existence. It is also a cleaner prosecution to employ the law enforcement decoys. So in most cases, that's what we do. We rely on law enforcement for that. And it's a better way to operate.
When you're walking through some of these doors and facing these people that you've been tracking and that they're there for these insidious reasons, are you nervous? Like, are you heart pumping? Like,
oh yeah. I mean,
did that go away or subside with time?
You manage it, but I've learned, from sources in law enforcement and people who do things like I do, the day you get lazy and think that, or not lazy, but lax about procedure and you're not completely focused, that's when stuff happens that you don't want to happen. So I'm always aware,
vigilant
of the situation, but it happens quickly. And you're looking at the man's hands, you're looking at the body language. And again, law enforcement's very close by.
Yeah.
We have this set up to be absolutely as safe as it can possibly be. But there's no doubt that the inherent risk is part of what draws people to watch it.
Sure.
And we are covering the commission of a felony. So, there's inherent risk here. But I think for what it is, we make it absolutely as safe as possible. And the times I've almost got my ass kicked, we're not doing predator stories or going over to Cambodia to expose child sex trafficking or going to Africa to expose, Al-Qaeda dealing in blood diamonds. The most danger I've ever been is, exposing a bike thief in Greenwich Village and, going after a counterfeit phone part salesman in a mall in Connecticut. Those are the last two times that I almost got, into a fight. So go figure, I just always find that ironic.
The seemingly least dangerous ones.
Yeah. I mean, we're in Connecticut, all right.
That's fantastic. When you started realizing that the show was going to have some success, that things were moving in the right direction, was there any sort of questions that you were having for yourself at that point in terms of like, is this something, like, because you're talking about the responsibility, is this something that we should keep doing? How do we go about doing this the right way?
Well, I think it raised a lot of questions about that, and I think there were those in traditional journalism who turned their nose up at it a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it shaming people? Is it, what's the purpose of it? And I maintain that because it is a crime where demand reduction doesn't work, it's not like the drug problem, that the best way to approach it, to combat it, is through education and awareness, and to have a dialogue with your children that prevents them from becoming targets. And that's a tall order, it's a big ask, but I think our stories continue that dialogue. And again, people don't always watch them for that reason. Yeah. There are darkly humorous moments, as we mentioned, but I don't mind that because it continues to create awareness. We're doing a big story for TruBlu on sextortion, and these kids who are targeted online, and scammers pretend to be girls, and they send a sexually explicit photo to a young man, and they get him to send a sexually explicit photo back, and then they blackmail him. And sometimes these scam artists are half a world away in Africa or wherever. And these kids get so shocked, and they're 16, 17 years old, their brains aren't formed all the way, they're straight A students, oh my God, what's going to happen if they send this picture to grandma? And they commit suicide. There have been at least a dozen suicides that we know of in our investigation in these sextortion cases.
Wow.
I was at the San Jose Police Department last week. They had 4 sextortion reports in one day, the day before I was doing the interviews. And I sat there with grieving parents who tell me what a wonderful boy their son was, and are still coming to grips with the fact that he didn't come forward and say, I effed up, let's get through it. And the parents like, there's no risk here to you. We would have got through this. We would have scrubbed the internet. Who's going to see it anyway? But in their mind, in that snapshot of time, they were so shocked and embarrassed that they took their own lives.
Wow. Yeah.
And to me, that's the kind of story that you have to really get out there, and on many levels. And that's what TruBlu allows us to do, is to turn these things around. I've been in this business 40 years, so I have access, I have a brand, and we use it for these types of things that will not only reach people on our streaming platform, but also we can then produce a version that we can give to schools across the country and police departments around the country, and fine, take it.
Yeah,
we've already had our commercial bite at it.
Sure.
On our own streaming network.
Yeah.
So share it, give it away, let people watch it, and use that brand in whatever school cafeteria or gymnasium around the country that might help somebody from not doing that. It's a waste of a life. And it just, I approach this stuff as a parent.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, because you were a parent doing To Catch a Predator.
Yeah.
So, I know for me doing my show for the last 3 years, it's hard not to be paranoid because it is the least suspecting people. It's like you said, there's a New York firefighter, there's police officers.
We've had clergy come into our sting operations.
Yeah. How did you navigate that as a parent, where you're you want to let your kids still have a normal childhood, but also you've seen what's on air, but you've also seen in the investigations.
Well, we watched it together, and to me, part of parenting is tricking your kid into doing what you want them to do without them, and let them think it's their idea.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, I wish I had thought it up myself, but I borrowed it from my parents' age. But I don't remember being overly paranoid about it. There were boys doing boy stuff, and I always tried to lead by example as best as I could, and have them a part of the process. They're in the business now. One's behind the camera, one's in front of the camber. So they're doing their own thing now. They're 31 and 28. And there's one funny story that, one of my youngest son, at the early stages of Facebook, they created a fan page for a teacher, and it was a Catholic school, and they had a statue of Christ in there, and they made some fun of the teacher, and they got in trouble for it. And so I get a call from the headmistress of the school, and I'm panicky because I'm in a car headed to the airport, and it's, why is the head of the school calling? And she says, there's something about your son. And I said, what happened? I said, is everybody okay? Yeah, it's okay, but they created a Facebook. I go, oh no, what did they do? And so they Mr. So-and-so was great, and it should have been a situation where Mr. So-and-so made him run 5 laps on the football field and been done with it, but instead it elevated into this big thing, and he learned his lesson. But that in terms of online stuff, we were very fortunate that that's about as serious as it does.
That's very devious.
Yeah.
But again,
sinister
as it was. But we were in the early stages of this. Now, stuff was going on, right? And I'm sure there's stuff that happened that I don't know about as a parent that, even being an investigative reporter, that was kept, swept under the rug for me at the time, as so many times happens. But I think, it got more difficult to navigate right after those years, because when we were doing Predator, they were young, but they had enough of a kind of a watchdog over them between parents that I don't think anything serious happened.
How's it changed all the investigations and things with how much? Because it's chat rooms on AOL versus now there's Facebook, Instagram.
Well, it's so
Snapchat.
It's so diffuse now. I mean, when we started this, we merely had decoys on AOL and Yahoo, and that's where all the activity was. Maybe MySpace, remember that. And now there are countless
unlimited,
social media platforms, and so there's more activity, more nefarious activity than ever before, but it's so diffuse that it's hard to catch these guys. I mean, you've got online gaming, you've got all the platforms that you guys are aware of, that I'm aware of, and stuff that we don't even know about yet.
Right.
And then it all switches over to one-on-one DMing or texting. But it happens even in the most innocent of platforms, or what we think they are. We have a case right now, we're doing a whole hour special for TruBlu on a 12-year-old girl who was approached by a guy in Florida. Girl was in Michigan, approached, groomed, set up a meeting. He flies up from Florida, has the 12-year-old girl sneak out of her bedroom window, meet him in a church parking lot. He takes her to a hotel, sexually assaults her. She goes to the emergency room, predictable injuries. They report it. They go back through the chats. They find the surveillance video at the hotel. They find the rental car receipt. They trace him all the way back to Florida. The Genesee County Sheriff's Department in Michigan goes back down there, finds him, braces him. He gives them a statement. Turns out that he had been stalking the family. We find out just the other night, we got his text that he's in a Walmart where the girl and her parents are, telling her to go into a family restroom so they can start this relationship.
Oh my goodness.
And, imagine how chilling that is. And then he gets her to sneak out the window of her home and assaults her. And they bring him up, and he cops out. He admits to 2 other sexual assaults that went down the same way in other states.
Wow.
So here's a guy, Peter Pechik is his name, and so he's going to be the target of one of our big investigations, probably in the next week or two on TruBlu.
Well, that's the scary thing, is never one,
No, and it's and all these guys over and over again. This is my first time. I'll never do it again.
Or I wasn't going to.
Yeah, I wasn't. We had a guy.
Yeah.
We just put up on TruBlu the most recent one. He shows up at a house. He's got a jar of weed as big as your water cup there. Condoms, money, all kinds of stuff. And I was just here to help her out, to get her out of this bad trash season.
Well, that's my favorite. I was concerned for her. So I came to
was
check.
concerned for her. And the kicker to that is, it gets to the point where I say, well, there's something you need to know. And I'm Chris Hansen. He said, I knew that. I said, well, how did you know? He goes, I'm 49 years old. I watch TV. Everybody knows that. So, well, what are you doing here? We're getting now. I mean,
like generational.
No, it's generational. Yeah. We have generational followers. We're the 3rd generation of followers now, because kids pick this up on social media, on YouTube, and all these other platforms, as well as the original ones. But these guys, more often than not, will say in the chat logs, "Hey, this isn't a Chris Hansen thing, is it? Or this isn't a Sheriff so-and-so thing."
No,
and they
it is not.
No, I promise.
Exactly. Who's that? And they show up anyway. We get fanboys now. I mean, it's shocking to me.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I watched the show, and I was thinking back. I was talking to my wife about it. I was thinking about when I started watching it, because I remember watching it with my dad, young, having conversations about how dumb these guys are and all this kind of stuff. But obviously, now through the podcast, through the show, through the streaming service, you've kept sharing the message in different ways. So the show you're doing in Vegas, what is that approach, and how do you, when you hear live show to get
Yeah.
to Predator, is there a plant in the audience?
Yeah.
Like, how are we? It's a very elaborate setup. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unique franchise, you know. Yeah, it's not like one of those, you know, when the state police has the TV giveaway for all the people who are behind on the
Check the chair next to you.
Somebody look under your chairs.
Yeah, you owe some money to the state. There's no sting that we're aware of there. No, but I think it's an opportunity to you know, satisfy people's curiosity, this intense interest in what we do and how we do it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a very, I don't know if intimate is the right word, but it is. It's interactive, maybe is the better word. To have people in a room that's not too big, and to talk about this, and to show some things they haven't seen before, and to get behind the scenes in essentially a tell-all, and a tell-all in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, and because people always ask, you know, is there anything you haven't shown? Is there anything we don't know? And for the most part, we have everything out there in the shows. We don't hold anything back. But there's context to it that I can give in a show like this here at the South Point in February that you can't give in a 5, 10, 12-minute piece.
Sure.
And that's what this is about. And I've given a lot of speeches and talks to different groups over the years in different places. And you know, now that COVID is pretty much opened up again so we can do this, it was a great opportunity to start here. And it's a template that we can use at college campuses across the country and for groups who, you know, seek to educate people on this very topic.
What is so you have now your own streaming platform called TruBlu, which you just launched very recently. The whole idea behind it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically a platform dedicated to essentially true crime, these types of sting operations. What, besides you're doing a show there, what are some of the other types of shows that people can expect to watch?
Well, for instance, we have one coming out called The Facebook Fiend, where a number of young women had been victimized by a guy who posed as this new agey, musician, and he would set up meetings. He would sexually assault them, physically assault them, take money from them, and this grooming would take place over a period of weeks. And these women were so upset that they couldn't get their story told, and they weren't getting, interest that they thought they should get from law enforcement. And it was all around the country. I mean, it was Arizona and Washington State and Maryland, and this guy was very prolific, and he's a total sociopath. And so they came to me, and we started putting it together. And this is why TruBlu is so great, because we can respond to these things very quickly. Within weeks of them coming to me, we're doing interviews.
Because your mission isn't like we need views on a network. Your mission is we need to get as many of these stories out as we can.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, we need views.
Sure.
Right. We're not doing this
for free.
Yeah. I mean, we need to cover what we do here. So there's obviously a commercial aspect to it, but also we cut through all the bureaucracy of a big network.
Yeah. Right.
We don't have 12 months of A meetings and B meetings and green light meetings, and the agent pairs you up with a production company and they go pitch it, and they may give you seed money for the sizzle, but then they don't want the sizzle because their budget's messed up for that year, and could we do it next year, and now we go to a different network. It's mind-numbing. Now I call Sean Reck, who's my partner at TruBlu, and say I need a crew on Thursday. Conrad shows up with his gear and crew on Thursday, and we shoot the story.
That sounds much better.
Now, because it is much better. And look, I'm in a stage of my career where I can do this, right? But because of the investigation, partly because of our investigation into the Facebook Fiend, charges were filed in Washington State. And because of our investigation, they were able to determine that he was in New York, and they were able to get a warrant, and they were able to get the marshals to grab him.
Awesome.
And they went on and got him and bring him back to Washington to face criminal charges. Now, I've watched a lot of these cases, and a lot of these predators, all kinds of predators, know how to target vulnerable people. Not stupid people, not desperate people, vulnerable people, and they know right who to look for. Single mom, not much of a social life. What a nice guy. Yeah, sure, let's continue this conversation. Maybe we can get together. My son is with his grandpa this weekend. Let's get together. And that's how it starts. And they know this.
What's your advice to somebody? Like, there's so much good things that come from
absolutely.
from DMing people on
Yeah.
social media or from
We get stories all the time.
Yeah, a lot of great couples that come out of it.
I have friends who met and married because of their
Sure.
relationship on social media.
Sure. So what do you do? Like, hey, if this person invites you to their hotel room, probably not a good fit,
No.
but like go to a busy area, meet first time
It's
at
got to
a
be in
busy
public.
restaurant somewhere or
and
whatever.
look, we're doing another story on dating sites. We have a whole franchise that we're developing on to catch a serial bad guy dater. You know? And there's a lot of common sense that has to go into it. And what I preach to parents and to kids, if you don't know somebody in real life, you don't know them online.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy who sends a picture of a good-looking surfer dude from San Diego could be a fat 68-year-old, in his mother's basement in his underwear, surrounded by pizza boxes.
Right.
So you don't know what you have, and so you need to do your due diligence. And it's sad that if you're a single guy or gal looking to create a relationship of some sort, that you have to be a private detective. I mean, really, it's sad that you have to do that. I mean, in the olden days, you went to the restaurant or the bar, or you met people at work, or but the pandemic largely changed all that. I mean, there are people whose only relationships for a period of
even coworkers,
Yeah, I mean, totally. We're isolated, and when it comes to inappropriate contact between adults and children, it soared during the pandemic. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children will tell you, and there's mandatory reporting that goes to that organization, that those approaches went up 900% at the peak of the pandemic.
Oh my God.
So what does that tell you? And so it's across the board. It's not just adults trying to do horrible things to children. It's adults on adults. It's any kind of scam that you can possibly imagine.
I think you highlighted something, because I know naysayers of you, and I see naysayers of what I do that go into, this is law enforcement. Let them cover it. Why are you talking about it? Why are you sharing it? And I think from what you just said, like, one, there's too much for law enforcement to even possibly handle all of it. But on the other side, like, where do you see that responsibility kind of end with you exposing versus let's step away from this and just wait for law enforcement to handle this?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think I found the balance with the kind of proactive enterprise journalism that I practice. It is not vigilante.
Right.
I mean, you see some of these people on
You're not
YouTube.
turning the camera off when they get in the room.
No,
It's not Dog the Bounty Hunter bursting the door.
Yeah, we are covering the commission of a felony, and we hold people accountable. And because of my years doing it, law enforcement across the board will collaborate for the most part. I mean, obviously, look, there are big agencies that have bureaucracies that don't make it easy to do this, but we know which agencies to work with. It's not the vigilante thing where the guy does research, finds a guy who's doing this and just jumps out of the bushes and makes 10 seconds of dramatic video.
Yeah. There's a lot of those guys.
There are a lot of those guys,
popping up now,
and those cases are very difficult to prosecute. And so you get a guy who's done something bad who walks. Now, I'm not, criticizing all of them. Some of them have done work that's led to prosecutions. Some are well-meaning. But more often than not, these vigilante groups are problematic for a lot of different reasons, including the fact that they're just out to get clicks and attention and gain money. Now, I like clicks and attention, and I like to have a commercial enterprise. I get it. But the way we do it is much different than the way some of these other guys do it. Yeah. There is plenty of room in society for citizen journalists and people who have podcasts and people who help solve crimes and create discussion and awareness. There's a whole industry onto itself of that, and that's good. Citizen journalists should have a voice, but it can go downhill quickly if done irresponsibly
and not ethically.
I wish we had a lot more time. There's a lot more things that we could dive into.
I promise I'll come back. I enjoyed this very much.
We'll do a part two. A part two. Maybe head over to our studio when it's finished up, do a part two to this. But I just before we take off, want to re-highlight February 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Right here
at South Point in Vegas. Anybody that comes, let me know if you're coming into town. Love to meet up and say what's up to you, because I'll be in and around that time period as well. And then TruBlu. If you're watching, listening, any of these stories piqued interest. That's kind of where I want to wrap up. Is can you tell us something that's on TruBlu that people will need to go check out? That was one of the crazier stories that you guys are covering currently.
Well, I mean, one of the upcoming documentaries is about a con woman named Tracy Hutsana, who spent some time here in Las Vegas, who now owns a couple of restaurants with her husband. This woman has been involved in the con game since she was like 15 years old, according to her own family. She was hired by a woman named Jumana Kidd, who's a television personality, the former wife of Jason Kidd, the basketball star and Dallas Mavericks coach. In the course of a few months, Tracy Hutsana was able to scam, steal, and divert upwards of $3 million from Jumana Kidd and her children.
Oh my gosh.
And this might have gone unprosecuted and unknown to many people, but for Jumana becoming a detective on her own and really bringing a great case to NYPD, because the accounts, even though she lives in LA, the accounts were still in the New York area, and the FBI, which investigated, and we got in very early on this case and have chased, Tracy Hutsana around to hold accountable, and it's an amazing yarn.
Wow.
So that's at the final stages of production now. Obviously, we've got all the new Predator cases. We've got the sextortion special coming out. We've got the Facebook Fiend that's about to come out, and many, many others. And then we have some lighter fare. We have a whole series on firehouses around the country and the food they serve and the different recipes. It's just really fun. And then we have a whole cache of films and documentaries. My partner Sean Reck, among other films he did before we became partners, did the White Boy documentary on White Boy Rick Wershey, who was a teen drug dealer in Detroit. A story that I broke as a young reporter in Detroit in the 80s.
No way. Okay.
And that's how I met Sean, was he interviewed me for that film 6 years ago, and we got to talking, and he had launched American Gospel TV, which is a gospel-themed streamer that's done very, very well. And he got together with me and said, let's do this for crime, and that's what we're doing.
Awesome.
Love it, love it. So if you're checking this out, February 3rd, 4th, and 5th here in Las Vegas. And then if you're watching this and it happens to be past that date, then go subscribe to TruBlu. Check out some of the shows that Chris is putting out. It's always compelling, interesting, intriguing content.
Watch TruBlu.com, TRUBLU. Podcast Predators I've Caught.
Predators I've Caught, the podcast, yes. So go check that one out. Totally free. Listen, whatever podcasting platform you're listening on right now, go check that one out as well. Chris, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. No, it was a pleasure.
Yes,
good luck with all your endeavors.